I was living in a modest apartment complex on the east side of town. The kind with thin walls where you could hear your neighbors arguing about who forgot to buy milk or what show to watch on a Friday night. I'd been there for about 8 months, settling into a comfortable routine of work, occasional meetups with friends, and quiet evenings at home. That's when I first noticed him, my neighbor in apartment 4B, just across the hallway. He moved in during the early spring, and I remember helping him carry a particularly stubborn couch up the stairs. His name was Alex, tall with dark hair that always seemed slightly messy, as if he'd just run his fingers through it. He had this easy smile that appeared genuine, not the forced kind you give to strangers out of politeness. We'd exchange casual greetings in the hallway or by the mailboxes, nothing more than the typical neighborly acknowledgments. From our brief interactions, and what I could gather, Alex seemed to be the definition of straight. He mentioned an ex-girlfriend once, had a few sports posters visible when his door was open, and carried himself with that particular confidence that straight men often possess. I never thought much about him beyond appreciating having a decent neighbor who didn't blast music at 3 in the morning. At least, that's what I told myself. Maybe I noticed how his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he laughed, or how he always asked how my day was going like he actually wanted to know the answer. But I didn't dwell on these observations. After all, developing feelings for a straight neighbor would be setting myself up for disappointment. This is the story of how 3 knocks on my door changed everything I thought I knew about Alex, about myself, and about the assumptions we make about the people around us. It's about those moments when life takes an unexpected turn, and you're left wondering if what seemed like coincidence might actually be something more intentional. Let me take you through what happened, because sometimes the most significant changes in our lives begin with something as simple as a knock at the door. The first knock came on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. I remember it clearly because I had just settled in for the night, wrapped in my favorite blanket with a book I'd been meaning to read for months. The sound startled me slightly. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was already past 8. When I opened the door, there stood Alex, looking slightly embarrassed, his hair damp from the rain. "Hey, sorry to bother you," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "This is going to sound really stupid, but I think I might have gotten a package of yours by mistake. The delivery guy left it at my door, but the name is smudged, and I just wanted to check." He held out a small brown package, and I could see that the label was indeed water-damaged, the ink blurring into unreadable smudges. I didn't recall ordering anything, but I took the package from him, our fingers brushing momentarily. Was it my imagination, or did he let his hand linger for just a second longer than necessary? "Thanks for bringing it over," I said, examining the package more closely. "Though I'm not sure it's mine either. Let me check the order number inside, and I can let you know tomorrow." Alex nodded, but instead of turning to leave, he hesitated. "Actually, while I'm here, I've been having trouble with my kitchen sink. The faucet keeps dripping, and the landlord won't be able to send someone until next week. You mentioned once that you're pretty handy with that kind of stuff, right? Any chance you could take a look? I'd really appreciate it." I remembered mentioning my amateur plumbing skills during one of our brief hallway conversations weeks ago. The fact that he remembered surprised me. "Sure, I can take a look. Now works if you want." That's how I found myself in Alex's apartment for the first time, kneeling under his sink while he handed me tools, and we chatted about our jobs, the building's quirks, and a podcast we apparently both followed. The faucet issue was simple, just a loose washer, but our conversation flowed so naturally that I stayed for nearly an hour. When I finally left, there was a moment at his door, a pause filled with something I couldn't quite name, before he thanked me again and said goodnight. Walking back to my apartment, I told myself it was just a neighborly interaction. The package mix-up was plausible, and faucets do leak. But I couldn't help wondering about the timing, about how he could have texted instead of knocking, about how his apartment was surprisingly tidy, as if he'd been expecting company. I dismissed these thoughts as my imagination running wild. After all, why would my straight neighbor manufacture reasons to see me? The days following that first knock continued as normal. We'd see each other in passing, exchange friendly words, and move on with our separate lives. But something subtle had shifted. Our hallway greetings lasted a bit longer. He'd ask follow-up questions about my work or weekend plans. I found myself taking extra care with my appearance on days when I knew I might run into him. Still, I kept my growing attraction firmly in check. Reading too much into friendly behavior was a recipe for embarrassment and awkward neighbor relations for the rest of my lease. About 3 weeks later came the second knock. This time, it was a Saturday afternoon. I was in the middle of a cleaning spree, music playing loudly as I danced around with a duster. When I opened the door, slightly out of breath and probably looking disheveled, Alex was standing there with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Hey, sorry to interrupt your cleaning concert," he said with a small smile, gesturing to the music still playing inside. I locked myself out of my apartment. My spare key is at my sister's place across town, and I was wondering if I could hang out here until she can bring it over. Should be an hour or so. It seemed like a reasonable request, though I couldn't help noticing he was dressed particularly well for someone who was just hanging around the building on a Saturday. A fitted button-down shirt that complemented his eyes, dark jeans that looked new. I invited him in, hastily turning down my music and clearing some space on the couch. "Make yourself comfortable. Can I get you something to drink? Water, coffee, beer?" I offered, suddenly aware of my apartment's state. Not messy, but definitely lived in, with books stacked on end tables and a collection of coffee mugs that needed to be returned to the kitchen. "A beer would be great. Thanks," he replied, settling onto my couch with an ease that suggested he felt comfortable in my space. As I grabbed drinks from the fridge, I noticed him looking at the photos on my wall, mostly travel shots and pictures with friends and family. "These from your trip to Thailand?" he asked when I returned, pointing to a series of photos I'd taken the previous year. I was surprised he knew about that trip. I must have mentioned it in passing once, but I didn't realize he'd been paying such close attention. "Yeah, spent 3 weeks there last summer. It was incredible." What was meant to be a brief wait for his sister's arrival turned into hours of conversation. We discovered shared interests in travel, obscure films, and a mutual love for trying foods from different cultures. He told me about growing up with 3 sisters, about his job as a graphic designer that allowed him to work remotely, and about his dream to visit every continent before turning 35. I shared stories about my family, my work as an environmental consultant, and the novel I'd been trying to write for years. The conversation flowed so naturally that I almost forgot to wonder about his locked-out situation. It wasn't until his phone buzzed with a text that he seemed to remember as well. "Oh, that's my sister. She's finally on her way," he said, looking at his phone with what seemed like disappointment. "She got caught up with her kid's soccer game." When his sister texted again that she was outside, Alex lingered at my door. "Thanks for letting me crash your cleaning day," he said. "This was really nice. We should hang out intentionally sometime, not just when I'm creating emergencies." There was something in his voice, a hint of vulnerability that caught me off guard. "Yeah, definitely," I replied, trying to sound casual while my mind raced. Was he suggesting what I thought he was? Or was this just friendly neighbor talk? After he left, I replayed our afternoon together, analyzing every comment, every laugh, every moment our eyes met. The second knock seemed less coincidental than the first. I started to wonder if his sister had actually been coming with a key, or if that was just a convenient excuse to end our time together before things got too complicated. I chided myself for overthinking again. Surely I was projecting my own growing feelings onto innocent situations. Over the next couple of weeks, our interactions became more frequent. We'd text about random things, a funny sign he saw on his way to work, a restaurant recommendation I thought he'd enjoy, a question about whether I could hear his new speakers through the wall. I couldn't. We ran into each other coincidentally in the building's small gym, at the local coffee shop, and once at a bookstore where we ended up browsing together for over an hour. Each time, there was this undercurrent of something unspoken, a tension that neither of us acknowledged. My friends had varying opinions when I finally confided in them. My best friend Mia was convinced Alex was interested but unsure how to navigate his feelings. "Straight guys don't text you about books they're reading unless they're interested in more than your literary opinions," she insisted. My other friend Ryan was more cautious. "Don't set yourself up for disappointment. Maybe he's just a friendly guy who values your friendship." I tried to take Ryan's more measured advice, but it became increasingly difficult as Alex worked his way further into my daily life. I found myself looking forward to his texts, planning my grocery runs around times I might bump into him, and yes, occasionally listening for movement in the hallway before leaving my apartment. I was acting like a teenager with a crush, and I knew it was getting ridiculous. I needed to either address these feelings or move past them. The third knock changed everything. It came late on a Friday night, almost midnight. I had just returned from dinner with friends, and was getting ready for bed when I heard it, softer than the previous knocks, almost hesitant. When I opened the door, Alex was standing there, no package in hand, no story about being locked out. He looked different, nervous, determined, and something else I couldn't quite place. "Hey," he said simply. "Hey," I replied, waiting for the excuse, the reason for this late-night visit. But none came. "Can I come in?" he asked instead. I nodded and stepped aside, my heart suddenly racing. He walked past me into the living room, but remained standing, as if sitting down would make whatever he came to do more difficult. "I don't have an excuse this time," he said after a moment of silence that felt much longer than it probably was. "No mixed-up package, no locked door. I just wanted to see you." The directness of his statement caught me off guard. I had prepared myself for another elaborate story, another pretense that we could both pretend to believe. "Oh," was all I managed to say, which wasn't exactly the eloquent response I would have preferred. Alex ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture I'd noticed from the beginning. "I've been trying to figure out how to do this for weeks," he continued. "The thing is, I've never felt this way about a guy before. I didn't know how to. I wasn't sure if you would." He trailed off, clearly struggling to find the right words. "You weren't sure if I would what?" I prompted gently, still not entirely convinced I wasn't misinterpreting the situation. He took a deep breath. "I wasn't sure if you would be interested in someone who's still figuring things out. Someone who thought they knew exactly who they were until they met you." There it was, the confession that changed everything I thought I knew about Alex, about the knocks on my door, about the growing connection between us. He hadn't been making excuses to see me because he needed help with a faucet or was locked out. He'd been making excuses because he was coming to terms with feelings he hadn't experienced before, navigating territory that was new and probably terrifying for him. "The first time I knocked," he continued when I remained silent, processing his words, "I just wanted to spend time with you. I had this package delivered to me by mistake, and it seemed like the perfect excuse. The sink was actually broken, but I could have fixed it myself. I just wanted a reason to invite you over." "And the second time?" I asked, finding my voice. A small, embarrassed smile appeared on his face. "I did lock myself out, but my sister doesn't have my spare key. The building manager does. I wanted to see if what I felt the first time was real or if I was imagining it." "And what did you decide?" My voice was barely above a whisper now. "That it was real. That it is real." He took a step closer to me. "I've never been with a guy before. I've never even wanted to be. But there's something about you that makes me question everything I thought I knew about myself. And tonight, I decided I was tired of making up excuses to see you. I wanted to be honest, with you and with myself." The vulnerability in his admission was both beautiful and terrifying. Here was someone stepping into the unknown, challenging his own understanding of his identity because of feelings he couldn't ignore. It would have been easy to jump into his arms, to let emotion carry us away. But I knew from experience that these moments of revelation can be complicated, that what feels certain in one moment can become confusing in the next. "Alex," I said carefully, "I'm really honored that you trust me enough to share this. And I'd be lying if I said I haven't felt something between us too. But this is big for you. Are you sure this is what you want to explore? Because I don't want to be an experiment or a phase." He nodded, understanding my concern. "I've been thinking about this for weeks. It's not just physical attraction, though there's definitely that too." A slight blush colored his cheeks. "It's the way I feel when we're talking, how I look forward to seeing you, how I find excuses to text you about nothing important just to connect. I don't know what label that puts on me, and honestly, I'm not sure I care anymore. I just know that I want to see where this goes, if you're willing." We talked for hours that night, sitting close on my couch, but not touching, exploring the contours of his realization and my own feelings. He told me about past relationships with women that had felt right, but never quite complete, about moments in his life when he'd felt connections to men, but had dismissed them as admiration or friendship. I shared my own journey of coming out, the challenges and joys of living authentically, and my fears about starting something with someone still discovering this part of themselves. As the night deepened into early morning, our conversation shifted from serious exploration to lighter territory. Laughing about his elaborate excuses, my obvious attempts to run into him by chance, and the friends on both sides who had seen what was happening before we admitted it to ourselves. When he finally left, the sun was just beginning to lighten the sky. At my door, he paused, much like after that first night when he'd asked for help with his sink. But this time, the unspoken thing between us had been given voice. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull back if I wanted to, and kissed me, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence when I responded. It was sweet and electric and felt like the beginning of something significant. In the weeks that followed, we navigated this new relationship carefully. There were moments of doubt for him, times when years of assumed identity would clash with his emerging understanding of himself. There were concerns for me too, worries that he might decide this wasn't right for him after all, that I might end up hurt when his exploration concluded. But there were also beautiful discoveries, moments of connection that felt more genuine than anything either of us had experienced before. We took things slowly, getting to know each other more deeply before physical intimacy complicated matters. We talked about boundaries, expectations, and fears. He met my friends, who welcomed him with a blend of curiosity and protective caution. I met his sister, who apparently had suspected his feelings for me before he had acknowledged them himself. Looking back now, those 3 knocks on my door marked distinct chapters in our story. The first, curiosity and possibility. The second, growing recognition and connection. The third, honesty and courage. I don't know where our relationship will ultimately lead. Perhaps we'll build something lasting together, or perhaps this will be a meaningful chapter in both our lives before we move in different directions. What I do know is that I'm grateful for each of those knocks, especially the third one, when he didn't bring an excuse but instead brought his truth. It's reminded me that people are more complex than the labels we assign them, that connection can appear in unexpected places, and that sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin when we're brave enough to knock on a door without knowing exactly what waits on the other side. As for Alex, he's still figuring out how to define himself, or if he needs to define himself at all. What matters most to both of us isn't the label, but the feeling, the genuine connection that brought him to my door that third time, without an excuse, just with the simple desire to see where our story might lead. Total _char_count, 14,103.